Hello everyone, investment scams rampant. Please vigilant and discerning. Do not trust information from unknown sources. Please make sure recognize two official Capital Securities community, Facebook, Capital Securities, YouTube, Capital Wealth Insights.
Hello everyone, welcome to Capital Good Night. Today is Tuesday, March 24th. I'm analyst Jang Jaida. Before we start, remember to like, subscribe, and share. If you have any investment questions, feel free to leave a comment. If I don't cover something clearly today, I'll analyze it for you in tomorrow's session. All right, before we look at today's investment highlights, I'd like to say hello to everyone. Anyway, today's market doesn't feel much different from yesterday's. It's just constantly caught up in the geopolitical turmoil of the US-Iran conflict. One moment they say negotiations are okay, and the next they're out denying it. Anyway, when will this soap opera finally end? I'll provide some updates on that today. At this stage of the soap opera, I think there's actually a glimmer of hope for negotiations. What does that glimmer depend on? I'll explain it all in a bit. All right, good evening to Hui Huan Huan, Yin Yin Mei Daizi, good evening Mei Daizi, and hello Elwin Chan, good evening brother Yu Lun, and good evening to Gong Zua Ren, Coco Lee, Zai Fei to Yu, and Alice Fu. Good evening everyone. As always, if you have any investment questions, feel free to leave them in this live stream or on the message board after class. I'll basically read every single one of your comments after the session. Some are just chatting, some are sharing, and some might be asking about stock trends. All are welcome. Just treat this as a place for us to interact and chat. If I have any information, I'll try my best to answer everyone during the show and not wait until tomorrow. Unless I don't have time to see it, then I'll get back to you tomorrow. All right, good evening CP and good evening D, yeah. Okay, let's take a look at today's investment highlights. First up, the soap opera of conflicting stories. Are US-Iran negotiations on track? By conflicting stories, I mean from last night until today, you can see the leaders of both countries are, clashing over whether negotiations are happening. Trump said there's been productive talk and progress regarding the conflict with Iran. He even suggested that for 5 days, there would be no attacks on Iran's power plants and energy facilities. But right after he said that, all the top Iranian officials, from the leadership and diplomats to the Iranian media, all came out to deny it. So one says yes, the other denies it. What stage is this soap opera at now? So why did I say there's actually a glimmer of hope for US-Iran negotiations? That's very important, and we'll talk about it in a moment. Also, on the industry side, I want to mention a stock we haven't talked about in a while, AMD, led by Mama Su, Lisa Su. AMD is making quiet progress. We know that among all the AI industry leaders, NVIDIA is definitely the front runner. NVIDIA's global chip market share is over 90%. So who gets the remaining 10%? That's basically carved out for AMD. Many countries and companies don't really want NVIDIA to have a total monopoly, because if they do, NVIDIA could easily control prices and supply. So you can see that gradually many countries and companies are not only buying NVIDIA chips, but are also trying to collaborate with AMD. While making this quiet progress, AMD has recently landed quite a few orders. I'll be tracking what this means for their current stock price and fundamentals in tonight's show. There's also another company supported by the US Department of Defense called Palantir. Palantir's stock price dropped quite a bit recently, but lately it's seen a bit of a revival with a relatively large rebound, which is closely tied to those Defense Department orders. Now, in the field of AI, within the AI theme, even the US Department of Defense originally wanted to cooperate with two major AI companies, one called Anthropic and the other ChatGPT. However, both Anthropic and ChatGPT felt that the Department of Defense's actions in monitoring people, monitoring things like weapons of mass destruction and other military applications were not something they fully agreed with. So they both refused to cooperate with the US Department of Defense. But on the other hand, there are those involved in big data, some AI, and even military-related themes. Palantir, with its expertise in those areas, was chosen instead. Of course, this will have a supportive effect on its future revenue and even its stock price. In addition to discussing this investment focus today, I'll also give you a preview of tonight's economic data. The preliminary March S&P Manufacturing and Services PMI for the US, both sets of data, will be released at 9:45. Both the previous and expected values for these two figures are above the boom-bust line, which is 50. Generally, when we look at the Purchasing Managers Index, just remember 50. Below 50 indicates a contraction in the economy, while above 50 indicates that the industry is expanding. Currently, the previous manufacturing PMI was 51.6, with an expectation of 51. Even with the uncertainty of geopolitical risks from the US-Israel conflict, we can see that the expected PMI figure is still above 50. The previous services figure was 51.7, and the expectation is for it to remain unchanged. So at 9:45 tonight, just keep an eye on it. As long as the PMI Purchasing Managers Index stays above 50 or even close to the previous 51 or 52, it means the overall economy hasn't headed into a recession yet, so there's no need to be overly pessimistic. However, regarding external uncertainties like the US-Israel conflict, if it drags on for too long, if it's resolved within a short time, say 50 days or a month and a half, I don't think it will have a massive crash-like impact on the overall economy or inflation. But if it drags on for more than nearly 2 months, it will actually be quite unfavorable for the US economy, US inflation, and even the midterm elections at the end of the year. At that point, you'll see many economic indicators slowly starting to show signs of recession. But that's not the case yet. At least from the latest data we're seeing, I don't think there are many signals of a recession right now. However, if the US-Israel conflict continues to drag on, there will be a crisis. So just keep that concern in mind for now, but despite the concern, don't be overly pessimistic. There's no need for that yet. Okay, good evening, Michelin and Emily. Good evening, good evening. All right, good evening, Lin Wang. Lin Wang says, I speak too fast. Yes, actually, it's a bit of a struggle for me too, because every day during this evening slot, there's just so much to share with everyone, from macroeconomics down to geopolitical risks, including the economic side, the industry side, and individual stocks. Whether it's top down or bottom up, there's a ton of stuff to share. And since the show is only about an hour long, I have to get through all of it today. So sometimes I have students like Lin Wang or others asking if I can slow down a bit, but there's just so much to share. So if you feel like it's way too fast and you can't keep up, maybe when you watch the replay later, you can slow down the playback speed a bit, or you can pause it or use the fast forward and rewind. That's the only way. Otherwise, we have too much content. If I speak a bit slower, we might not finish until 12 o'clock today. That's likely how it'll go. So you might want to slow down the replay yourself, just like what user 7859 said. Just adjust and slow down the YouTube playback speed. Now, Caesar asked whether to hold or reduce positions in Micron and SanDisk. As always, take profits on long positions when prices are high. If it hasn't dropped below the quarterly moving average, the same rule applies. If it hasn't dropped below the 50-day moving average, it's the same for all your stocks. If it stays above the quarterly average, you can hold for now, or if it hits that average, you could even buy in with a light position. But as soon as it breaks below, remember to reduce your holdings. Or every time it hits a high or breaks a previous peak, just take some profits, bit by bit. Otherwise, with all the ups and downs, if you don't take profits at the peaks, every time it drops, it'll be painful. It's just a roller coaster, and you'll end up right back where you started with nothing to show for it. So I'd suggest taking profits on the highs and buying back on the lows, whether it's Micron, SanDisk, or any of these stocks with memory-related themes, whether it's HBM, DDR4, DDR5, or similar themes, it's all the same. Individual stocks follow this pattern too. Right, Eni, you're spot on. There's just so much data, so much that sometimes, even though I'm speaking really fast, as you can hear, there's still so much to cover. I'm talking this fast and it still takes nearly an hour. Sometimes I think I might be over-preparing. I really want to wrap it up in 30 or 40 minutes, but then I find myself answering questions online and chatting about this and that, and before I know it, it's 8:50 or 9 o'clock. It happens every time. Okay, the Richmond Fed Manufacturing Index for March will be released at 10 p.m. This data isn't that critical. The previous value was -10. It's not a major one, just a quick look is fine. So at 9:45 tonight, just watching the PMI data is enough. If it's above 50 and expanding, then there's no big issue at all. As for the stance of the officials in their speeches, in fact, these officials, whether they're governors or not, with or without voting rights, they're all saying the same thing. Facing the current geopolitical uncertainties between the US and Iran, what are they looking for? They're just asking that as long as the US-Iran conflict cools down and inflation doesn't heat up or spike, then there's still a chance for rate cuts this year. But on the flip side, if the conflict drags on and causes inflation to climb or spike a second time, then the Fed might say they won't rule out keeping rates steady or even raising them this year. So from Goolsby's remarks or Mester's, they've all mentioned this concern. Basically, if inflation doesn't heat up, rate cuts are possible this year. Even 4 cuts would be within a manageable range. But conversely, if this war drags on, and I've mentioned this often in my past shows, including every daily show from March until now where we've been tracking this, the US-Iran conflict, well, everyone should just focus on one thing. As long as the war doesn't drag on for more than 2 months, inflation shouldn't spike too high, and there's still a chance it'll come back down in the future. But if it goes past 50 days, then everyone needs to be careful, because that would have a wide impact, including the possibility that the Fed won't cut rates, or maybe not at all this year, and might even move toward hiking them. And if interest rates are too high, what happens? High rates mean higher borrowing and spending costs for people. Mortgage rates go up, business investment costs go up, everything goes up. Under those conditions, the stock market won't do well, and the economy won't do well. Okay, so when it's surging, relatively speaking, if interest rates surge and they're unwilling to cut rates because inflation is too high, unwilling to cut rates, 10-year Treasury yields and 2-year Treasury yields have all been heading up. And when interest rates go up, just remember that when interest rates go up, when interest rate levels go up, basically compared to gold, it moves in the opposite direction. So why has gold dropped so much lately? It's mainly because interest rates are high and not being cut. When rates go up, the US dollar gets stronger. It's like a seesaw. When the dollar is strong, commodities like gold and raw materials will fall. When the dollar is weak, raw materials and commodities like gold will rise. So it's a seesaw concept. Plus, with the demand for safe haven assets due to geopolitical risks, in fact, recent geopolitical risks have a more direct impact on oil prices, while gold is doing okay. The issue with gold has evolved into everyone worrying about high inflation and the Fed being unwilling to cut rates. So relatively speaking, it's actually become bearish for gold. Because they're unwilling to cut rates, gold only tends to rise when rates fall. When rates rise, raw materials are relatively more likely to suffer. This inverse negative relationship, once you get familiar with it and understand it, you'll know why, like in the last couple of days, including I think some newbie investors or other students also asked, or maybe it was KKL or someone else who asked, hey, why has gold been falling lately? What exactly is the logic? Once you remember this relationship, you'll get it. It'll be very clear because interest rates are too, stuck in a high plateau and they're unwilling to cut them. And the reason they're unwilling to cut is because of the current conflicts between the US and Iran, the war, inflation might surge again, so everyone's worried the Fed will do what? They won't cut rates anymore. Right. Just remember how these things are all interconnected. And also, good evening to SYR and good night to ANAY as well. Good night. Okay, and also, let me see. Dino886 asked, okay, thanks KKLI for asking teacher, if there's a stock you took profits on first, but then it pulled back later, would you add to your position? Took profits first, then it pulled back, would you add more? If I think this stock is very good and the fundamentals are performing well, then if I took profits first, took profits at the highs, of course I would add back to the position after the pullback. Yes, I just go back and forth. Like, for example, today, just as an example, I might be targeting TSMC or targeting companies like Apple, Tesla, and so on, which have some themes or even better fundamentals. And whenever they hit a relative plateau, or whether we're talking about a technical plateau or some fundamental issues arising, I might sell a portion first, or if I've made money at the highs, I'll sell a portion first. Maybe selling a half or a third, but I'll definitely keep a basic level of holdings on hand. Then when it pulls back, should I buy? I'll still add to the position. As long as there are no major issues with its fundamentals, I'll continue to trade it back and forth on pullbacks. That's my approach, so you can see if it works for you. Okay, good night, AR, and good evening to Grace Lyo as well. Okay, let's keep going. Now, there's another investment institution, Goldman Sachs, same situation. Goldman Sachs also said that, currently affected by things like surging oil prices and uncertainty in the Middle East situation, they believe the probability of a US economic recession in the next 12 months will rise from 25% to 30%, basically getting higher and higher. The premise is that the Middle East issues remain unresolved. They're even telling everyone that the unemployment rate might be revised up to 4.6%, and for September and December of this year, the expectation is for a quarter-point rate cut each, one cut each. So whether it's officials, Fed officials like Goolsbee, or investment firms, to put it simply, to be clear, it all comes down to one thing. What's that? As long as the US-Iran conflict cools down, the hawkish stances we just mentioned, the recession probabilities we discussed, they can all be tossed out. If the US-Iran conflict drags on, say for 2 months, then I'm telling you, the Fed's hawkishness will heat up and recession expectations and odds will rise. At that point, the stock market and economy will go bang and likely continue their downward correction. So it's simple, just watch the US-Iran conflict. So all the forecasts from investment firms or officials are based on this one thing. No need to look at anything else. No need to keep checking economic data or individual stock performance. There's none of that. Right now, it's just one thing: geopolitical risk. It's that simple, really. That's why the 10-year bond yield hit 4.5%, and the terminal rate went even higher, straight to 3.67%. What does that mean? If the terminal rate for 2026 is now at 3.67, it means that this year, basically, there won't be any rate cuts. Rates will stay the same. By the end of the year, they might be between 3.5 and 3.75, which is where they are now. That's the current market sentiment, that this year, maybe. Given the war situation, the original estimate of 2 cuts, then 1 cut, has now become no cuts at all. And looking at the number of cuts, it's dropped to 0.1. This means that with oil prices potentially spiking, maybe there won't be a single rate cut this year. But could this change? Will it really stay this rigid? It's only March, for heaven's sake. It's only March, and you're saying, Dino, no offense, it's only March, and you're saying rates won't change at all by December? I don't think it'll come to that. Why? There's still 9 months between March and December. Right, 9 months. If the US-Iran conflict shifts even slightly, the number of expected rate cuts will jump, right? The 10-year yield and terminal rate will cool down, so it all depends on the US-Iran conflict. This is just to add that the yields and rate cut expectations are driven by market sentiment. The US dollar index is the same. Due to short-term safe haven demand, it's fluctuating between 99 and 100, staying above the 200-day moving average. As for geopolitical risk, this is interesting. Is there any light at the end of the tunnel for US-Iran negotiations? From last night until today, what stage is this he said, she said soap opera at? This kind of back and forth drama reminds me of April of last year. Weren't China and the US in trade talks then? Trump was waging trade wars with various countries. It's actually the same, playing the same game. It's the same playbook. He keeps telling everyone 1 minute, I'm going to be tough and slap tariffs on everyone, and the next, I'm negotiating with this country, or I've settled rates with that country, or Xi Jinping called me privately and said China is willing to talk and back down. Isn't it always the same? They all use the same method. Be tough up front, negotiate slowly later, and in the middle, it's just back and forth bargaining until they finally reach a balanced, harmonious outcome. It's always like this. We just don't know if the process will take a month, 2 months, or half a year. But this approach feels very familiar to me, exactly like the trade war in April of last year. Exactly. Now Trump says the US and Iran have had 2 days of good, productive dialogue. We mentioned this in our live stream yesterday. The news came out at 7 p.m. last night, saying they delay for 5 days and not hit Iran's power plants and energy facilities. And then he said, what? The last negotiation was on the night of March 22nd. What were we doing on the night of March 22nd? I don't know. It seemed like a Sunday night. We were probably all watching TV, just chilling and eating fried chicken. Then he told everyone that the U.S. Special Envoy and his son-in-law, Kushner, were negotiating with Iran, but Iran denied it, saying it never happened. Trump even said they'd reached a 15-point consensus. If you have time, you can look up those 15 points. I actually took a look at that 15-point consensus today. The 15-point consensus, honestly, it just boils down to 2 main points. It boils down to 2 points. 1, Iran can't have nukes. 2, limit Iran's missile development. That's it. So do you think Iran can just completely reject this and say, no way? I don't think they're being that rigid. I think Iran might choose some flexible ways to meet the 15 points Trump's asking for. Of course, the main things are no nuclear weapons and limiting missile development. I think there's a chance. It's not impossible. Actually, I think the 6 conditions Iran proposed are harder. Iran's 6 conditions are much tougher. They're much harder than Trump's 5 goals or 15-point consensus. So I think the question now is whether Iran will accept it. Will they give Trump a way out? Will they really move toward reconciliation, either publicly or behind the scenes? So right now, I don't think it's untalkable. It's just a matter of whether they want to do it. It's not that difficult, just a choice. Also, Trump mentioned he's sending over 2,000 troops from the 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit to the Middle East by March 27th. Regarding this, just remember one thing. Some of it is true and some of it is false. In our Capital Goodnight show, we tell you which of their statements might be true and which might be false, helping you judge for yourselves. For example, when he says they'll delay the strike for 5 days, that's likely true. He wants some room for negotiation. Well, he needs to find some reasons, some excuses to give himself a way out. So in the end, he says they'll delay for 5 days. I think this 5-day delay is probably real. As for whether it's to prepare for a bigger strike later or to really negotiate with Iran, we don't know. But the 5-day delay is likely true. Secondly, regarding the 15-point consensus, I think there's a high chance it's real too. Because honestly, those 15 points don't sound that difficult. So Iran has likely received information regarding those 15 points. Oh, and then the 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit arriving in the Middle East on March 27th, that's also true. They're being stationed there, so if negotiations go south, they might move to take, what was it, Karg or Karg Island? Anyway, like we said yesterday, that little island right there, that's a major hub for 90% of Iran's crude oil exports. Right there. Karg or Karg Island, whatever, that's the island. The northwest of the Persian Gulf. So regarding this matter, I think the parts I've circled in red are real. They're real, so it's not that they won't talk. That's why I just told everyone that there's a bit of a glimmer of hope for US-Iran negotiations. They can talk. There's some flexibility. As for Iran, it's interesting. The whole Iran situation is interesting. The foreign ministry, speaker, and Iranian media all deny negotiating with the US. We'll ignore that. They keep saying no negotiations. But today, it's reported again that the Iranian speaker supposedly said they want to talk. The Revolutionary Guard says they control the strait and haven't laid any mines. This matters. This is very important. You might ask, sir, no mines? Right, no mines. Why is no mines important? Because previously, Trump said, don't you dare go into the Strait of Hormuz and lay mines, because that's very difficult to deal with. If you lay mines, I'll beat you senseless, so don't lay mines and don't close the Strait of Hormuz. So today, the Revolutionary Guard just came out and said, since I'm now in complete control of the Strait of Hormuz, there's no need to lay mines. Do you see the logic and the art of how they speak? The Revolutionary Guard obviously can't just do whatever Trump tells them to do just because he's being tough. They can't lose face, right? So Trump tells you that you can't lay mines, and is the Revolutionary Guard supposed to say, oh, okay, I won't lay mines then. I'll satisfy your demands? Number way. You have to be tough and say, I'll do what I want. But the reason they don't need to lay them now is because the Revolutionary Guard already controls the Strait of Hormuz. So naturally, there's no need to lay mines. You see? So this is their way of telling Trump, I've met your demands. You wanted me not to lay mines? Fine, I haven't, but I'm announcing it to the world in a different way, so people think that's the reason I'm not doing it. Not because I'm afraid of you, Trump. That's the concept. Now, there's something else that's very important. Iran said, and this is confirmed now, Iran itself said it, that they have indeed used Egypt and Turkey as third-party countries to pass messages back and forth, and they've proposed conditions for a ceasefire. But honestly, these conditions are quite difficult. The conditions Iran proposed are really hard to swallow, including things like the US paying reparations, war reparations, and admitting to territorial violations against Iran, and many others. We even talked yesterday about the 6 conditions Iran proposed. The 6 conditions include things like, regional wars can't happen anymore, and the international community must guarantee Iran's security so that war won't break out again. And then nuclear weapons, missiles, all that kind of stuff, you can't stop Iran from developing them. Furthermore, you must close all US military bases across the Middle East. You can't attack Syria, Lebanon, the Houthis, or any of Iran's allies. None of it. All of this sounds honestly very difficult, completely impossible for the US to accept. They just can't accept it. But all we can say is within this very rigid framework, Iran has indeed used Egypt and Turkey to convey its desire for negotiations. Now, whether the US can accept those demands and conditions, that's another story. But at least he's opened another window in hopes of getting a message through to the United States. That's a good thing, you know? It's a good thing. As for whether it'll succeed, that's another issue for everyone to consider. We're just telling you that from Trump saying yesterday he'd delay the attack for 5 days, to the 15-point consensus, to today's reports from Iranian media and their foreign ministry saying they haven't laid any mines and have indeed sent messages through third-party countries, but the US isn't agreeing to those messages yet. So what does this mean? It means at least the two sides aren't completely out of contact. Okay, keep that in mind. Now, besides whether they're in contact or not, Can the US and Iran actually negotiate this week? They're saying it might happen this week in Pakistan's capital, Islamabad, right? Oh, not Istanbul, Islamabad, the capital of Pakistan. They're in talks there with Iranian representatives like Speaker Kalibaf, the US envoy, and then the son-in-law Kushner and Vice President Vance, blah, 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 lots of people saying the war is set to end on April 9th. Will this date actually happen? I don't know, but April 9th means that if the war started on March 28th and lasts until April 9th, if they really stop the fighting, that's about 40 days. So what do 40 days represent? If they can really stop the war in 40 days, that fits with what Treasury Secretary Bessent said about hoping to get it under control within 50 days. If it's controlled within 50 days, inflation won't spike too high, and you might get 50 years of Iran not using nuclear weapons in exchange. So I'm telling you, we talked about a very important number yesterday, 50 days. If this war ends within 50 days, with gradual negotiations and both sides slowly implementing a ceasefire, not an immediate total stop, but a gradual one, then I think the impact on the economy and the stock market won't be too severe. But if it goes over 50 days, that means it's hard to negotiate. Meaning after 50 days, it'll be more of a struggle. It'll be quite a struggle. Okay, let me take a look at what everyone's been commenting just now. Let's see. What's this? Hey, how can I be as handsome and smart as you? Who are you talking about? Probably not me, haha, because I don't think I'm that handsome or smart. But if you mean me, then thanks. Thanks for the compliment. Okay, let's look at their data here. Let me see if there's any way to copy the teacher's genes. Okay, William Huang is asking, if this drags on, can they still win the midterm elections? Right, if it drags on, inflation rises, interest rates stay sky high, and they're unwilling to cut them, then Trump's polls keep dropping, and he's stuck in a tough spot. And if the US-Iran conflict isn't handled well, then indeed, in the elections at the end of this year, the Republicans in the House and Senate will have a harder time. Honestly, it'll be tougher because those party members running for election will also put pressure on Trump. Because if you mess up and life becomes unbearable and the economy makes everyone miserable, with oil prices surging and US gas prices hitting the roof, they'll be the first to feel it. Once basic necessities are affected, the public's approval of these politicians will drop significantly, and it'll become very hard to win the election. Very hard to win. Okay, and also, AYA, you wrote that the teacher has an 8-pack. That's probably from that thing before, right? Was it Maple Sister? Or something like Get On Board? I think that was the slogan, if I recall correctly. The US hasn't fought for 5 days. Maybe Netanyahu and the US are working together on it. It's possible. Maybe Netanyahu just won't accept US control. He can't be controlled. Okay, good evening, Melissa. Melissa says this week has been a sad. To be honest, the market this week has been under a lot of pressure, whether it's Taiwan stocks or US stocks. So did I reduce my position? How much cash do I have? I'm currently maintaining about 20 to 30% cash. I'm still keeping 20 to 30% in cash. Now, you're asking if any of the stocks I'm holding are currently underwater? Yes, some are. Have I made money in the past? Yes, I have. But with this recent pullback, it's inevitable that some stocks are down, maybe by about 10% or so. But I try to pick companies with good fundamentals. So honestly, a 10% pullback or being underwater isn't a huge deal for me. Why? Well, first of all, I still have 30% cash on hand, so I can wait to add to my positions later. Secondly, for the 70% in stocks, some companies might be down 10% in the short term. Why? Why am I not particularly worried? It's because these are all good companies. Even if they're down, I believe that once the geopolitical risks subside, these companies will all eventually bounce back. So stock selection and timing are incredibly important. And of course, maintaining a certain cash level is even more crucial because we never know exactly how the market's going to turn out. All right, Iran's acting tough right now, like a cooked duck with a hard beak. Anyway, let's wait and see. 50 days and people get numb. Emily's right, too. If we talk about it slowly over 50 days, maybe everyone gets numb. Gradually getting numb, you know? It's interesting. What happens after that? After getting numb, it'll be like when there's bad news in the market, the market will naturally digest it. Next, even if the war between the United States and Iran, the hostilities, assuming the war hasn't ended. Assuming it hasn't ended yet, but if it's gradual, you'll notice one moment a missile hits somewhere, then some power plant gets attacked. If everyone realizes one day, These attacks are still happening, but oil prices stop rising. While Trump is talking big and Iran, those officials are acting all high and mighty, refusing to back down, and everyone is just trading insults. But if everyone realizes, while these situations are still ongoing, but oil prices aren't rising anymore, and the stock market seems to be gradually desensitized and stops falling, then remember what it means. Just like what Emily said, everyone is numb. Being numb is a good thing. It means the bad news has been priced in. Then what happens is when all the bad news is reflected, digested, and the market is desensitized, all that's left is for some good news to appear one day and boom, it shoots up. So this is a very important message. That is, the stock market often reflects the economy. The stock market often reflects economic data and market news in advance, even reflecting events ahead of time, when it might reflect as bad news a month, half a month, or even 3 months in advance, and slowly finishes digesting it. Then that's the time for everyone to look for good companies at low prices. So remember, there will be some signals will emerge, but it's not right now. It's not now. Everyone still needs to, hold back a bit. Don't be too aggressive in chasing it. It's not the time yet. Not the time. We can only say that there's a tiny, tiny glimmer of hope in the negotiations between the United States and Iran right now. But that tiny glimmer might be fleeting. It depends on whether both sides are willing to seize it. If not, then this glimmer might just flash across the sky like a shooting star, beautiful and brilliant, but only for a moment. So let's see what happens in 50 days. So the price in New York crude oil, after Trump said yesterday there'd be no war for 5 days, it dropped again, down to about $85. Suddenly, it rose by 2.61. Okay, so that's the general idea. Just remember that. Anyway, we'll talk more about it when the market becomes desensitized. There will be a time for that, but it's not now. Everyone, just wait patiently. As for earnings reports and economic data, we'll be going through them this week. There aren't too many important ones, so don't worry too much. Regarding the industry side, let's talk about AMD. It's like a duck paddling underwater, this AMD. AMD, of course, is one of the top AI chip companies after NVIDIA. Whether it's the AI 300, AI 350, or others, in the future, there'll be the AI 35, MI 355, then MI 400, MI 430, 450, and so on. The chips keep improving. NVIDIA has the B100, B200, GB100, GB200, and now the Rubin series, R100, R200, and later the Feynman series. So AMD uses MI as a prefix, whereas NVIDIA names theirs after various scientists, starting with H, G, B, and so on. That's the concept. Now, what did AMD say? They said they've secured a purchase agreement with a South Korean AI startup called Upstage. What chips are they buying? The MI 355. To be honest, the MI 355 isn't their top tier chip. It's not the highest end model, but is it usable? Yes, it is. Because AMD's future chips have already reached the MI 400 series one mentioned, the one starting with 4. The 3 series is common now, but the 4 series is higher end. So just know that Upstage in South Korea buying 10,000 MI 355 chips is good, but it's not their absolute top of the line product. However, this purchase is significant for AMD. Why? Because previously, the South Korean market was almost entirely dominated by NVIDIA. NVIDIA basically led all the AI infrastructure projects with the South Korean government. But now this AI startup is willing to partner with AMD. And why will this partnership help AMD? To some extent. Because this company is involved in a recent competition held by the South Korean government. About 4 companies were selected in this competition to develop AI models. The government will collaborate with them, potentially using national funds for support. There are 4 companies currently. 4 companies are competing, and one of them is Upstage. That's the one. So keep an eye on them. If this company is eventually chosen from the 4, performs well, and gets government support or partnership, then AMD effectively enters the South Korean market as a key partner. That's the general idea. So remember, this company is currently planning to buy 10,000 units from AMD. Honestly, 10,000 isn't much. It's actually quite small. 10,000 chips is very little. Think about NVIDIA, with companies like Meta, Google, or any major firm buying NVIDIA chips in the hundreds of thousands or millions. They buy so many, so 10,000 is relatively small. But at least it's a foot in the door, like getting an entry ticket. If they succeed, 10,000 could become 100,000 or a million, just like Nvidia's growth. So to add to this AMD story, like a duck paddling underwater, countries and companies don't want to rely solely on Nvidia. If Nvidia is the only player and supply has issues, or if every country and company is dependent on Nvidia's chip supply, what happens if one day Nvidia says, I won't sell to you? Then they're in trouble. That's why these countries and companies are so eager to find a second option besides Nvidia. That's the strategic reason for choosing AMD. So AMD's stock price is doing quite well. You can see it's currently above the 200-day moving average. To be honest, its short-term trend is a bit more stable than Nvidia's. If I recall correctly, Nvidia seems to have dropped below its annual moving average. So looking at AMD, it's at least above that line. As long as it stays above it, it can keep making steady, quiet progress. There might be a chance to reverse the current downward trend of the monthly and quarterly averages. So keep an eye on this. It's a foot in the door for the Korean market. Now, another company is Palantir. Palantir mainly focuses on big data, its development and application, especially for military use, like databases for the Department of Defense. Previously, Palantir was involved in, well, the Iran-Iraq war, I think, the Gulf War, or when they were going after, who was it? Saddam Hussein, I think. And who was the other one? Bin Laden? I believe so. When the US Marines were going in to capture bin Laden and Saddam, they used Palantir's big data to predict their locations before launching the raids to catch them. So Palantir plays a very, very important and professional role in defense AI and big data. This time, the Pentagon is continuing to use the company's Maven system. And what does this system do? It uses AI to analyze battlefield data, automatically identifying weapon targets between friend and foe, providing reconnaissance, and assessing enemy capabilities. Basically, it's for national defense. This will obviously be a big boost for Palantir's revenue and future stock price. Since Anthropic and OpenAI don't want to work with the Department of Defense, they have to turn to Palantir. Palantir jumped 6.74% yesterday. So let's watch this trend line, specifically this blue neckline. It actually dropped below this line in January of this year, but fortunately it rebounded. With the recent Pentagon orders and collaboration, it's luckily back above that neckline. So if you hold Palantir, remember the price level of this neckline. Just look at the screen and you can roughly see where that relative price point is. As long as it doesn't fall below that price, there's no need to worry too much about Palantir. Conversely, if it drops back down, the pressure will increase. Gaining and then losing ground is never good for a stock price. So after yesterday's surge, let's see if it can hold this neckline today. Whether it can hold. And finally, someone mentioned bin Laden. Yes, I think it was bin Laden. Okay, and another thing. One more thing. Someone said, Louis Yang, good evening to you too. KKK Oli said, they follow my advice on selling high and buying low. Have you profited since February? Okay, great. Congrats on making money, KKK Oli. I hope everyone can keep up this momentum. Also, good evening to Zhao Yao Yu. I recall you mentioned in the comments that sometimes you're at work during our live streams, so you're working hard just like me, often right after a shift. Now, you asked about Trump. Does Trump actually know what he's doing? I think he probably does. He likely knows his goals, but whether he can achieve them and get the desired response is a huge uncertainty. Regardless, we'll keep watching. Both the US and Iran have their own strategic considerations and agendas. That's pretty much how it is. Short-term pain for long-term gain, as Louis Yang says. Anyway, in the short term, let's just let it fluctuate. Let it fluctuate, but don't miss out on good companies. It's a shame that some good companies are being unfairly sold off. Now, there's another company, a great company, a very good company, but it's been taking a beating lately. One of the Magnificent Seven is taking a real hit, dropping significantly. What's it called? It's called Microsoft. Microsoft might be under more pressure today. Why? Well, you know it previously invested for a 27% stake. Since it now holds equity, that's a 27% share in OpenAI. Initially, the total investment, all in all, I recall it being maybe $12 or $13 billion invested in OpenAI. To date, it's over $10 billion. Now, OpenAI has issued a warning. It's projected that OpenAI might go for an IPO in the second half of this year. But before the IPO, it actually warned investors looking to invest in OpenAI. Do you know what it said? It said We're warning investors that our current relationship with Microsoft could pose a potential risk to our future business. Why? Because it says Microsoft handles most of OpenAI's financing and computing power operations, providing all that support. So if Microsoft were to one day modify these contracts or terminate its partnership with OpenAI, or if OpenAI as a company is unable to partner with others to diversify its collaborations, meaning if it could work with Google, Meta, Amazon, and others besides Microsoft, it would increase operational diversity and likely reduce future business risks. But as it stands, without those, there could be an adverse impact on its future business and prospects. So it's already given everyone its heads up. Basically, if OpenAI really goes public by year end, but remains entirely dependent on its big brother Microsoft, it could face major issues with its basic needs or significant constraints on its development. That's what it's telling everyone. What does it mean? It means it doesn't want to rely solely on Microsoft one day. It wants to be able to stand on its own and even thrive. In other words, if OpenAI gets stronger and more independent, moving beyond Microsoft's control, then Microsoft's past investment of over $10 billion might gradually yield less. If OpenAI starts making massive profits, Microsoft might only get its 27% share and wouldn't be able to do much more than that because OpenAI will grow up. Children grow up, and when they do, they become harder to control. Once independent, they have their own world and their own path to follow. They can't stay under the wing of their parent, Microsoft, forever. So they might argue or rebel against their parents because they want their own independent life. This is all, as we say, perfectly reasonable and normal. It's just that in this process, Microsoft is under a lot of pressure. Microsoft has invested so much. And while you can see that OpenAI is making money and has revenue, currently OpenAI's investment exceeds its revenue and profits, so its current cash flow is still negative. The more money Microsoft pours in and the longer it takes, if that positive cash flow doesn't start growing and returning quickly, Microsoft's pressure will be significant. Now, will Microsoft collapse? No, it won't. It doesn't just rely on OpenAI. It's just that as AI capital expenditures keep growing, if they can't quickly improve the cash flow, what we call FCF or free cash flow, if things don't turn positive soon, the four big US CSP providers will face a lot of pressure. Their stock prices will likely be quite weak. Now, this Microsoft chart is a weekly chart, not a daily one. It's fallen hard. From $550, it's dropped all the way down to about $380. This pattern on the weekly chart is actually a rounding top. You could call it a bowl top. A top, not a bottom. A rounding bottom goes higher and higher, rising one to one. A rounding top is basically a bearish structure. Usually, from a technical standpoint, this kind of rounding top structure will fall back to its starting point. It typically drops all the way back. To see where that is, let's slowly move the screen back to March of last year, 2025. Okay, because on this weekly chart, if you go back to March 2025, you can see where this rounding top originally started. So we're estimating that Microsoft's stock price might just head straight back to that starting point. Once it's there, we can start looking for a buying point. We'll look for a buying point then. As for the weekly level, this is the 200-week moving average. It's currently stuck right here. Whether it can hold, I think we need to wait and see. Microsoft's fundamentals are great, but technically and in terms of market sentiment, it might need some time to consolidate. So today, I've briefly covered the trends for AMD, Palantir, and Microsoft. Microsoft's still relatively weak, quite weak actually. Let's wait and see for a bit. I believe it'll perform well in the future, but it'll face more pressure in the short term. Okay, let's move on. Microsoft isn't just micro, right? But it's been pretty soft lately. And it's not just Microsoft. It might stay soft for quite a while. Okay, looking at US pre-market stocks, Dexcom is up 2.6%. Huntington Bank shares is also up 2.23%. Then there's CF Industries, Corning, Estee Lauder, and Boston Scientific. These are major companies, and they're only up about 1 to 2% pre-market. I don't think they'll provide much support or attraction for the US market, honestly. But we need to watch the decliners. The first one is down 2%, which isn't a huge drop. It's not a big drop, but it's Apollo Global Management. Why is it down pre-market? It's related to the cockroach theory. One of Apollo's private equity funds is currently facing 11% redemption pressure. Usually these types of Investment banks set a limit on their private equity funds, usually a 5% threshold. If redemptions are within 5%, they generally pay out. But if it exceeds 5%, they will delay the redemption process. And this time, their fund is seeing an 11% redemption wave. This isn't just about Apollo. We've seen similar warnings from KKR, BlackRock, MFS, and various big and small investment banks. Investment banks have issued warnings about private equity and credit concerns. It might not be just one cockroach. Maybe it's a whole swarm that'll explode one after another. Everyone needs to keep this in mind. Besides the US-Iran geopolitical risks and the ongoing talk of war, people aren't focusing enough on these private credit funds. But if the war between the US and Iran ends one day, everything will be fine, right? But the private credit issue isn't over yet, so everyone still needs to keep a close eye on it. Other declining companies include Freeport-McMoRan, as well as gold and copper mining firms. Carnival, Royal Caribbean Cruises, On Semiconductor, and so on. Those companies fell by about 1 or 2%. Today's U.S. stock futures look like they're fluctuating slightly, mostly down, dropping about 0.2 to 0.3%. The drop isn't huge, but I want to remind everyone not to get overly optimistic just because Trump said yesterday we won't attack Iran for 5 days. There's no need for that. Just view it as a preliminary move for U.S.-Iran negotiations. See it as an olive branch being extended to start talks and provide a way out for both sides. That's all. But if you're expecting an immediate and total ceasefire, it won't happen that fast. It just won't. So don't be overly optimistic about yesterday's rise, thinking it's the start of a major bull market that'll lead to new highs. Not at all. It's still early, so let's just wait and see. As for the Dow, it rose 1.38 yesterday, but it still couldn't break above the yearly line. It hit the yearly average at its peak and then just dropped right back down. Until it stays above that yearly line, don't overthink it. Just wait patiently for the decline to stop. The Philly Semi-Index was relatively strong among the 4 major indices, rising 1.34 yesterday. Fortunately, it managed to hold slightly above the neckline of the trend line. But if the other indices keep falling, can the Philly Semi really hold? It'll eventually give way too. It probably won't hold up if the other 3 keep dropping. It'll follow them down sooner or later. Conversely, if some positive signs emerge regarding the US-Iran conflict, then the Philly Semi will certainly climb back above its trend line. So there's hope, but stay cautious. Don't be too pessimistic, and of course, don't be too optimistic either. Now, the Magnificent 7 index is still very weak. Although it rebounded 1.6% yesterday, it's still below the yearly line and the neckline, so it'll take some time. Just be patient and wait for it to stabilize. I think the market will still need the Magnificent 7 in the future. Okay, a hacker said the US-Iran situation is a gray rhino and cockroaches are black swans. Gray rhinos and black swans. Well, you could put it that way. Regardless of whether it's a gray rhino or a black swan, everyone should stay neutral and rational. After all, whether it's a rhino charging or a swan flying in, the impact on the stock market and economy is significant. That's why I often tell you to always keep at least 30% cash on hand while trading. Why? Because we never know what will happen when we wake up tomorrow. What will the market do, or what will Trump say? So you must keep some cash for future needs or to be ready for a day when the index oversells significantly. Then, great companies like the Magnificent 7, TSMC, and others might actually present excellent investment value due to being oversold. When it's time to pick up those diamonds, you'll need cash to buy them. By following these principles, I think it'll be easier to maximize gains and minimize risks. All right, that's all for Capital Good Night. We're bringing you first-hand news before the U.S. market opens. Remember to like, subscribe, and share before you go. Finally, I wish you all successful trading. See you tomorrow.
Our company has no improper financial interests in the individual securities recommended or analyzed. The information in this program is for reference only. Investors should make independent judgments, evaluate carefully, and bear their own investment risks. If you don't want to miss the latest market updates, be sure to turn on the notification bell and hit subscribe. In addition, we have plenty of great video content on both Facebook and YouTube. Don't miss out. In our group, we share in-depth explanations of global financial events with you every day.